And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And moving on into marine forecasts here for Monday. Clarence Strait, southeast winds at 10 knots with 2-foot seas. Stevens Passage, southeast winds at 10 knots, seas 2 feet. Lynn Canal, same thing, southeast winds at 10 knots with 2-foot seas. For the south coast here, southerlies at 15 to 20, seas around 6 feet. Southeast 20 knots on the central coast and east at 15 for the north coast. Moving on to Tuesday. For the south coast here, we're looking at mostly a westerly breeze there blowing onto Prince Wales Island at 10. Central coast, southerlies 10 to 15. North coast, southeast 15 knots, seas 5 to 6 feet. Clarence Strait, northwest breeze at 15 knots, otherwise pretty light winds from the southeast here for the central and northern inner channels with slight seas. North Gulf Coast tomorrow, light variable winds, seas at around 5, maybe 6 feet. Light variable winds also in the forecast for Prince William Sound Monday. And for Cook Inlet, northeast 10 to 15, seas 1 to 2 feet. And for the Barren Islands, southeast winds 25 knots, or Kamishak Bay, southeast winds 25 knots, Barren Islands, southeast winds at 20 knots. And for Tuesday, Cook Inlet, north to northeast breeze 10 to 15 knots, seas at 2 feet. Small craft advisories here for Barren Islands and Kamishak Bay. Easterlies at 25 knots with seas only 4 to 6 feet though. And for the western North Gulf Coast, south of Resurrection Bay there, east winds at 20 knots. And for the eastern North Gulf Coast, southeast at 15. Prince William Sound, east winds 15 knots, seas 2 feet. Kodiak Island, Monday, south to southeast winds at 20. Alaska Peninsula, south to southeast winds 15 to 20 knots, and Bristol Bay, southeast wind 20 knots, seas 3 feet. For Tuesday, Kodiak Island area, east 15 to 20 knots. Alaska Peninsula, small craft advisory, southwesterlies at 25 knots. Bristol Bay, southeast winds 20 knots with 3-foot seas. And for the eastern Aleutians, small craft advisories for the day on Monday, west-southwest at 25. Central Aleutians, westerlies at about 20 knots here for Adak and Atka, and then winds becoming light and variable at 10 knots there for the western Aleutians. And for Tuesday, we've got small craft advisories, most areas here, from the west and southwest 25 to 30 knots there for the western Aleutians, west at 25 for Adak and Atka, seas running about 7 feet there, and west-southwest winds at 25 knots for the Fox Islands, with 6 to 8 foot seas. For the southwest coast tomorrow, east to southeast winds, 15 to 20 knots here, and for the Pribilof Islands, north at 15 with 4-foot seas. Northeast winds 20 for St. Matthew Island, and for St. Lawrence Island, winds east at 15 knots. And for Tuesday, Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island, easterly winds at 15 knots, same thing for the Yukon Delta coast. East at 20 for the Kuskokwim Delta coast, northwest 20-knot winds for St. Matthew Island turn northerly there as they blow across the Pribilof Islands. And for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast for tomorrow, west winds 15 to 20 knots, otherwise for the central and west side, northeast winds 15 knots. And for the Chukchi Sea, south winds 15 to 20 knots. Moving on to Tuesday, for the Chukchi Sea here, anywhere from east to south winds at 10 knots, so pretty light there with seas and open water areas at 1 to 2 feet. Southeast at 10 knots for the western Arctic coast, 15-knot winds out of the east for the central coast, and the east side here looking at east winds at around 10 knots. And for tonight again, remnants of that front coming northward here brings a band of showers with it into the Brooks Range. Otherwise dry behind it in the central interior with the showers tapering off, thunderstorms, and showers lingering for the Alaska Range, Kenai Peninsula. Showers more widespread here over the southwest interior, Kuskokwim Delta into Bristol Bay, Alaska Peninsula area. And some rain lingers over the panhandle. And for tomorrow, still a weak trough there, keeping it kind of showery in the north, a little drier to the south. And again, temperatures should warm enough to trigger some afternoon scattered thunderstorm activity over the interior areas. And moving on to Tuesday, we'll see this low drifts eastward a little bit. It's going to spin another front up into Kodiak Island for more rain. Same thing for Bristol Bay and the southwest coast, as well as some rain up to the North Gulf Coast.